Hey everybody, Braden here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be continuing our King's Indian attack speedrun all the way to 2000. That's our goal. Right now we are playing against FIFO, who is 1150, and they're playing a King's Indian defense against our King's Indian attack. So this will surely be an interesting game. And we're already at a crossroad here. So since our opponent's not being too direct in the center, we want to make sure that we make sure that we choose where we want to go. Now, c6 is a good move. It tries to worsen our bishop. So because of that, I'm thinking of playing the move e4. And e4, what it will do is it will gain more kingside space and let us go for a kingside attack. There's also c4, but because they played c6, I'm a little bit less inclined to do that. And now I'm very inclined to not go for a kingside attack, but b5 is an extremely weakening move, and we have to be open to changing our plans. And here, we are going to happily change our plans and play this move e5. And this will immediately open up this long diagonal here. And after we open up the diagonal, things are going to go pretty bad for our opponents. So I think we should take. And I'm assuming they will play pawn takes. And then I want to keep the pressure on this diagonal. If we can keep pressure on it, then that offers us good winning chances. And this is actually something we're happy to see, queen takes. The reason why pawn takes felt a little bit better is because maybe they can play d5 and try to neutralize our bishop. The thing is, their bishop is open for the moment, but our bishop on c1 is doing a great job just defending the pawn. So we don't really need to worry about doing anything too crazy with it. Instead, I'm looking at moves like a4, and a4 is trying to ask, hey, do you want to push and create more weaknesses where I can play moves like knight c4? Or do you want to take it and ruin your pawn structure? If you do neither, then I'm considering taking on b5 and opening the diagonal further. And I like that move quite a bit, so I want to play it. I always want to consider some sort of knight e4, tempo against the queen. But right now, the knight is actually better on d2, because if they take, then the knight would probably want to go to c4 instead. Because of this b5 move, which weakens the long diagonal for us, we want to play on the queen side, I believe. As we have something to attack over there, and our opponent, they have the b2 pawn to attack, kind of, but it doesn't really feel like too much will come from it. And this is what I mean. So now knight c4 comes, defends our only weakness, and now we're ready to move our bishop as well, which is really nice. Yeah, so I like h3, kicking the knight, and then playing bishop e3 to attack the queen. If they take, I'm not really worried. I'll just take back with the rook. Very safe thing to do. And they move here. And I think this is not the right way to play the position. Because after we take everything, what happens is they lose their dark square bishop in a position where they fianchettoed it. So I'm actually happily going to just take everything here. And now they're going to have some significant problems with the c6 pawn. But not only that, we can actually ignore that and just play the move d4. So I want to protect this pawn before I do anything crazy. So d4, protecting the pawn, very safe move. And the idea I have now is, well, what's the biggest weakness in their position right now? There's two. This diagonal and also the king side dark squares. And generally, a position is holdable when you have one weakness. You can use all your pieces to defend that one weakness and you should be okay. Here, there's two weaknesses, and we're going to use the principle of two weaknesses to take advantage of both. So while we go for a kingside attack, it's hard for them to bring their pieces to that side of the board, like knight d7 to f6, because we're always threatening to take on c6. Now I like bishop e5, attacking the queen once again, asking where it will go. And it's not so clear where it should go, because no matter where it does, like queen e6, I'm going to go queen d2. And I'm going to try to ask them to create more and more weaknesses. Right now there's an idea of queen h6 in the air. I'm not really worried about taking on d7 or anything like that. They thought I was going for the b pawn, but that's not true. I'm actually going for queen h6. Do I protect my c pawn here? I could. There's no reason not to. I could just go c3 here. This is a very safe move. I wonder if there's anything else, like g4 in the position. G4 actually protects my c-pawn because they can no longer attack it. And g4, you have to be very careful with playing these types of moves. But I'm being a little bit more lenient with them because we have a direct weakness to attack, which is their king. And this is much more important. So now queen h6 has to be met with f6. It has to be. And because of that, I'm not sure if I actually want to play queen h6 yet. Because f6, then I move away, and did I accomplish anything I'm proud of? Maybe, maybe not. Instead, I'm looking at f4, and this is going for an increased amount of activity on this side, where I'm trying to go for f5. And if takes, their queen has to move back again. So actually, f4 sets up a nice trap, where if they go knight d7, I can go f5 and mate them immediately. Knight d7, f5, they have to take, or they go queen c4. But if they go queen c4, I think I can go like b3. I can also consider something like queen h6 there, actually. Yeah, so here I think f5 is also good. And there's also d5, surprisingly. d5 is not easy to answer, because if they take it, bishop takes d5, which just wins their queen. But f5 feels more natural because I'm going for a kingside attack. If takes, I'd no longer have queen g5, but yeah, I think because I don't have queen g5 anymore, I should consider d5 a little bit more. f5 does look really good, though. So d5, queen d7. And then I could take on b8. And at the end there, after I take on b8, I just go like rook d1. I give up my dark square bishop, though. I'm not sure if I'm happy about that. f5 looks a little bit more natural. I think I'm going to go with d5. I think d5 is probably the best way to play here. Queen d7 is the only move. I guess there's queen f7. Yeah, there's queen f7. But the problem is I take on b8 and then I take on c6. And I'm up a clear pawn. And it looks like that variation is going to happen. So I'm going to take. And then I will take on c6. So there are some things that our opponent has that we don't. And that is their king's a little bit safer now. And our king's a little bit more open. But we do have a pretty nice extra pawn for it. So our goal here is to exchange things off. Because if we exchange a lot of pieces off the board, we might just end up in a winning position. I want to go rook d1. And this sets up kind of a trap. Where rook d8 is a bad move. Because we can just take it. And then play c7. I guess instead of playing c7, we might just want to play something like b3, just to be safe, so there's no queen c4. So they end up doing this. So I could actually play c7 as well. I just realized this. c7 might just win on the spot. Because if they take, we can actually just take on b8 first and promote. So that's kind of a funny move, right? Whenever you see one move that looks good, queen takes d8, we would get a queen for 2 rooks, which is 2 rooks is worth 10 points, a queen is worth 9, so we win just a tiny bit of material, and our pieces look like they're coordinating okay. Our king's a little open, so you have to be a little bit worried about that. But sometimes when you see those types of moves, you got to look for better, and c7 is clearly going to be the better choice here. And this should win the game. So now we can take. So this is what's called an intermezzo move. If we instead recaptured back on d2, that would have been a huge problem for us. We would have been lost because they can just play rook c8, and then if I give a check or anything, they just play king g7 and they're okay. Yeah, so our opponent ends up resigning here. That was a really fascinating game, and I want to check the computer here because there were some points where it was kind of creeping me out. Like, what do we exactly do here? So d3 knight d2, all of this looked good. c6 I think is a great choice because it's just a positional move trying to worsen our bishop on g2. And now we see e4. b5 I think was a problem, and yeah, the computer kind of agrees with that e5 or even a4 first both cause problems on this diagonal, and both are an attempt to worsen the pawn structure. So a move like b5, you have to be very careful while playing it, because if you play b5, what can happen very easily is you overextend yourself and you have to create more weaknesses. For example, after b5 and a4, if you push or if you take or anything, then moves like knight c4 come, let's just say b4, then you can start seeing that, yeah, the c4 square is a little bit weaker and maybe we can put a piece there in the future. And that's kind of what happened in the game as well. So after e5, knight g4 looked pretty reasonable. d4 is actually really strong here. I didn't even think of that. So that's really cool. The idea here is, oh, we don't actually take back. We play h3 here. Wow. Knight f6 and then we take. I don't know if we take with the knight or the knight, and pawn takes is okay, but pawn takes is better. I'm not going to worry about that though. I thought taking on d6 was okay. And a4 is top move by far. And again, it's just what is our best piece. Our best piece in any of these King's Indian structures, especially if we don't have a pawn blocking it, is going to be our fianchettoed bishop. It's a defensive piece as well as an offensive one. And the more we can make that piece sing, the better our position becomes. And with a move like a4, it's directly asking, hey, I want to make my bishop amazing. And just a little tactic here, if a6, what's wrong with this move? So it looks like we can get away with taking on b5 here. And the reason why we can take on b5 is because they cannot take with the a pawn, because it's actually pinned here. We win the rook. And if they take with the c pawn, then the problem is it opens up the diagonal way too much, and this is just a huge problem. Moves like knight d4 are already being recommended. Rook a7, there's actually a beautiful tactic. Knight takes b5 here, taking advantage again of the fact that the a pawn is actually not defending the b5 pawn. So that's just something to point out is, again, treat your pieces with kindness. Your pawns should serve your pieces, not the other way around. If you're using your pieces to defend your pawns, you're playing defensively. Whereas if you're using your pawns to make sure your pieces have good scope and could go to nice squares, then you're playing aggressively. That's how I like to think about it. So b4. And again, now we have this beautiful square on c4, which I immediately jumped to, which looks correct. Here, I thought h3 would be good to throw in. It doesn't look like it hurts at all. And yeah, as we can see, the position immediately just falls apart. And I missed a simple tactic here. I'm going to give the excuse that I just played a tournament this weekend, and this is the morning after the tournament. So my brain is a little fried from chess. As I'm recording this will go up just in a few hours actually. But there's actually the simple idea of knight c takes. This is very important to play d4. And we don't play knight f takes because the problem here is there's no more d4. But here I just evaluated this as pretty much winning at this point, just because, again, they gave up their dark squared bishop, and now they have no dark squared defender on their king side. And also, they have a problem on the long diagonal. And I was talking about the principle of two weaknesses, and this is exactly what I meant. Is there's a lot of weaknesses here, and it's actually really hard to defend. d4 made sense to cover the b2 pawn. No reason to give them anything when we have several weaknesses we can attack for nothing. Generally, it's okay to create a weakness for giving yourself a weakness. You just have to make sure your weakness isn't worse than theirs, or is at least equal to theirs. But generally, if you don't need to give a weakness, and here what I mean by weakness is giving up a pawn for nothing, that would be a material weakness, or like, a material gambit, you could say. To get a position like this, it's totally worth gambiting the pawn, but we don't need to. So d4, queen d6, bishop f4, we can develop with tempo. We absolutely should. And then bishop to e5 here. So after queen f5, I thought of this idea of going g4 and f4. And I'm not sure 100% if this is correct. g4 actually does pop up in the top 3 moves. f4 is not in the top 3, but it seems to still be giving us a good advantage. And f6 was a very good find by our opponents. I was really hoping for knight d7. This actually loses the game, I believe, on the spot because of f5. And the problem for them, let's make things as bad as possible for them. If they take, now it's dead lost because they move anywhere. It's saying queen f6, that's how bad the position is. But if queen c4, now it's just mate and 1. So what they'd have to do is play queen c4 here. But of course, this does not inspire hope in the position, to say the least. So after f6, I think f5 was reasonable, and it is giving it as top move. But it's also like kind of flirting with d5. And the reason why I like d5 more is because what was our powerful piece from the start of the game? It was our bishop. So I was just trying to give it room to sing. And I was correct in saying that queen d7 was the best try here. And the reason why is because if we take and take, we can't actually take on c6 here because, well, our queen is actually being pinned. And that's a very small nuance to notice. But that's why queen f7 isn't as good necessarily, because we could take on b8 and then take on c6. And actually we could take on c6 now, which is pretty crazy. The idea is takes, and they're just being killed immediately on the long diagonal. Like, we're threatening moves like c7 and queen d5, or just, I guess, c7, just winning the rook. And if they have to play something like queen e8, yeah, c7 just wins on the spot. Knight c6, queen d5 check. We'll pick up the piece that we're down, and, well, we're up material by quite a bit, and the attack still continues, which is probably the worst part. But okay, I ended up taking on b8 because I thought this was enough, and I appeared to be correct about this. Rook f d1 and rook d8, and importantly, again, we could take on d8. And I was thinking about taking on d8 because I think this is reasonable. And what I was looking at here is something like, hey, what if we play c7? But the problem is there's queen c4. And now they can target the pawn, and this is what I was worried about in the game. That's why I was thinking maybe I don't actually push it yet. I just bring another piece in, or maybe play something like b3 or bishop d5. Bishop d5 looks really good because e6, there's rook d7 winning the queen. And we're happy to trade things off, because if we trade things off in a position like this, then when we look at the remaining material, it doesn't matter about what comes off in an exchange. What matters what's still on the board after an exchange. And here we have a winning amount after this exchange occurs. So yeah, c7 is, I'm really happy with the move because it just immediately wins. I'm going to count that to my okay form during the tournament. By the way, the tournament I just played, it will be going up on YouTube in a few months. I have like one tournament game coming out every week, so it's going to take a while. It's just to avoid opening prep from my opponents. But I beat an FM round 1 I drew an IM round 2. By the way, I'm like 1900. So, well, like over the board. But now I should be close to 2000, which is really cool. And, well, I played 2 more FMs after that and barely lost. So I'm happy about that. Like, it was actually a really tough fight for them. And they were like, you know, actually, no, the first loss was not a tough fight. Like, they just kind of rolled me over. But the second one, that was a tough fight. And the fifth game, it was a draw, but we don't talk about that because that was a bad game. So anyways, going back to the analysis here. So c7, rook takes d2, and of course after we take, this is definitely resignable because we're just going to be up 2 rooks here, and that's just too much material at this point. They can do whatever they want, but in a position like this, I think it's fair to say that White's going to win this in short order. And that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed the analysis. If you guys enjoyed this commentary more than when I usually stream the games, let me know, because I might end up just recording them from now on, if you guys prefer that. But that's about it. So I'll see you guys tomorrow with another King's Indian Attack game. So have a good one. Bye-bye.